Sit down, little ghetto girl. Adults are talking. That's how it started. Just three simple words that felt like a surgical strike right to my 17-year-old soul, delivered by the man who held my father's future in his manicured hand. I was standing in the packed courtroom of Judge Thaddeus Vance, all eyes burning into me, my dad, Elias Cole, sitting at the defense table in handcuffs, his head bowed like he was already convicted. "Your Honor, my father is innocent," I managed to whisper, my voice shaking. But Judge Vance didn't even look up from the bench, just slammed his gavel, the sound cracking like a whip. "Bailiff, remove this child," he snapped, pointing at me like I was a piece of trash that had wandered in from the rain. The whole gallery stared. Some of the lawyers were barely hiding their smug little smirks. Dad, through the plexiglass, reached out with shackled hands, tears streaming down his face, silently pleading with me to leave. But I didn't move. My spine locked up, my chin lifted, and right there, surrounded by all that contempt and dismissal, something dangerous woke up inside me. They expected me to break, to cry, to run home to our small two-bedroom apartment in the Heights. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. 3 months before that courtroom humiliation, I was just Alana Cole, a high school senior trying to balance AP classes with a part-time job at the library. Our apartment, cramped and smelling faintly of my mom's famous corn pudding, was dominated by towers of old, yellowed law books. "Dad, why do you keep all these dust catchers if you're just a carpenter?" I remember asking him one evening, holding up a battered copy of jurisprudence. Elias appeared in the doorway, still in his work clothes, smelling of sawdust and sweat. His hands, worn and scarred from 20 years of building other people's perfect lives in the rich suburbs of Lakeview, were calloused. But his eyes, those were the same sharp, intelligent eyes I inherited. They told a different story. "Because knowledge, baby girl, that's the one thing they can't ever take from us," he said, settling beside me on the floor. "I work with my hands, but I think with my mind." "These books? They're insurance. Insurance against what?" I traced the spine of a book on civil procedure. Dad paused for a long moment, watching my fingers move over the legal text like I was reading sheet music. "Insurance against a world, Alana, that tries hard to make you small." At 17, I had already been accepted to 3 top universities, including a partial scholarship to Columbia. My teachers called me college material, a success story ready to leave Crestwood far behind. But none of them knew about the midnight hours I spent in those books, absorbing precedents and procedures like other kids absorb TikTok. My bedroom walls were a testament to my obsession. Instead of celebrity posters, I had taped up landmark Supreme Court decisions. Gideon v. Wainwright, Tinker v. Des Moines. Every case was a story of someone who had been counted out but fought back. "Alana, dinner!" My mom, Lena, called from the kitchen. Our small family table was our sanctuary, our planning room. Every night, Dad didn't just ask about my day. He really listened, pushing me to think deeper. "Mrs. Albright says I should consider pre-law at Howard," I said between bites of Mom's mac and cheese. "Howard's expensive," Mom said gently. She worked double shifts at the VA hospital, and we still counted every dollar. "We'll find a way," Dad said firmly. "Alana's got something special." "You see it in how she questions everything." I looked at him. This man who woke up before the sun, who came home bone-tired but still believed in my most impossible dreams. "I want to be a lawyer," I said quietly. "Not just any lawyer. The kind who fights for people like us." He smiled, that proud, hopeful smile that had carried him through years of being overlooked. "Then that's exactly what you'll be." But our world shattered on a Tuesday. Dad was working on a massive project downtown, a new luxury high-rise that would house the very law firms he hoped I'd one day join. The site was notorious for cutting corners. When Dad saw a forklift operator show up clearly high, endangering the crew, he did what his conscience demanded. He confronted his supervisor, Reggie Thorne, a guy who treated the mostly minority crew like disposable tools. "Thorne, Rodriguez is high on that forklift. Someone's going to get killed." Thorne barely glanced up from his tablet. "Mind your business, Cole. You're paid to lift, not think." "I'm paid to go home alive," Dad shot back, "and so is everyone else here." That's when Thorne snapped. He shoved Dad, screaming about uppity workers who didn't know their place. Dad stumbled back, his hands up, trying to de-escalate. Thorne swung first. What happened next took 30 seconds. Dad defended himself, pushing Thorne away when the man lunged again. Thorne fell, hitting his head on a stack of lumber. When the site security arrived, Thorne, surprisingly conscious and very fast, had already crafted his story. The security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned. The crew, terrified of losing their jobs, looked away. Elias Cole, devoted husband, honor student's father, a man who'd never seen a jail cell, was handcuffed and charged with aggravated assault. And my real legal education began. The public defender assigned to Dad was Mr. Sterling, a man who looked like a well-dressed sigh, juggling 50-something active cases. When Mom and I met him, he barely looked up from his computer. Cole, he muttered, clicking through files. Ah, yes. Construction altercation. Pretty straightforward. Prosecution's offering 18 months if he pleads guilty. I'd take it. My hands clenched. But he's innocent! Thorne attacked first. Sterling finally looked at me, a mix of pity and annoyance in his eyes. Sweetheart, that's not how the system works. It's your father's word against the supervisors. Guess who the jury believes in this town? He pulled out the plea form. Look, I've been doing this for 20 years. Black defendant, white supervisor, construction site. The math is simple. 18 months is a gift. If we fight it, he's looking at 10 years minimum, enhanced because Thorne claims your dad used some racial slurs against him. Mom spoke up, her voice small. Can't we get a different lawyer? Private attorneys start at $50,000 minimum, Sterling said, shrugging. Do you have $50,000 lying around? We drove home in silence that night. My Columbia acceptance letter sat unopened on my desk, feeling increasingly meaningless. That's when I started digging. Late one night, I discovered the Midtown County Criminal Records database. It took hours to navigate the obsolete system. But once I did, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Judge Thaddeus Vance had presided over criminal cases for 12 years. I pulled every case file I could access, creating spreadsheets that would make a statistician proud. The numbers were horrifying. In cases involving minority defendants and business owners' supervisors, Vance's sentences averaged 410% higher than state guidelines. The worst part wasn't the bias itself, but how methodical it was. Vance wasn't just prejudiced. He was systematic. I found dismissed charges for people who'd done far worse than Dad, probation for assault charges that had sent men like my father away for years. I stared at my laptop screen at 3 a.m., my hands shaking as I compiled the data. 48. Black men had faced Judge Vance in the past 2 years on similar charges. Average sentence, 8 years. Average sentence for white defendants on identical charges, 15 months. Oh my God, I whispered to the empty room. I felt the walls closing in. My friends were planning prom, and I was compiling evidence of judicial corruption. Alana, you missed the college fair meeting again. My guidance counselor, Ms. Perez, pulled me aside. Columbia called about your deposit. Are you having second thoughts? I looked at the letter that used to represent everything. I can't go to college while my father sits in prison for something he didn't do. Ms. Perez lowered her voice. Honey, I understand, but maybe he did do something wrong. Sometimes the people we love aren't who we think they are. The words hit me like a physical blow. Even here, where I was a model student, they assumed his guilt because of his skin color. Even my best friend, Chloe, cornered me. Alana, you're destroying yourself over this. You're throwing away a full ride to Columbia. He attacked his supervisor. There were witnesses. Just because you can't accept it doesn't mean the rest of us have to pretend it didn't happen. I stood up slowly. Your dad has never worked a day of manual labor in his life, and mine has never laid a hand on anyone without cause. You don't know him. She just rolled her eyes. My dad says construction guys get violent all the time, especially if they're dealing with drug issues. Maybe yours just snapped. I walked away. They expected me to choose my future over my father's life. One evening, I drove to the courthouse and waited across the street. I watched the expensive lawyers stride up the steps, briefcases in hand. Then I saw the other group, families like mine, clutching public defender business cards, worry etched in every face. A court clerk, a black man in his late 50s named Mr. Hayes, came out for a cigarette. I approached him carefully. "Excuse me, sir. I'm researching Judge Vance's court for a school project. Do you know anything about his judicial philosophy?" Mr. Hayes looked around nervously. "Little girl, let me give you some free advice. That judge, he's ended careers for less than what you're probably thinking. If someone you care about is facing him, start praying or start running." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Hayes took a long drag. "Vance doesn't just sentence folks. He destroys them, makes examples, and he's got friends in high places who make sure nobody questions his methods." "But that's illegal. There have to be oversight mechanisms." Hayes laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Child, you still believe the system works the way they taught you in civics class? Vance has been doing this for 12 years. You think nobody's noticed? You think nobody's tried to stop him? Transfer requests denied. Bar complaints dismissed. Career advancement blocked. Your daddy, he's just another number to him." As Hayes walked away, I stood alone, the weight of impossibility crushing down on my shoulders. Dad was facing a rigged system, a biased judge, and a process designed to chew him up. They expected me to give up. They had no idea. At the jail visitation, Dad looked 10 years older. The orange jumpsuit hung loose on his shrinking frame, his shoulders sagged. "Baby girl," he whispered through the phone, "maybe I should just take the plea deal." 18 months. "I can survive that." My throat tightened. "Dad, no. You didn't do anything wrong." "Wrong doesn't matter in here," he said, gesturing around the room filled with other families having desperate conversations. "I can't let you sacrifice your life trying to change it. Columbia is calling." "I was born to fight for my family," I said, leaning forward and pressing my hand against the glass opposite his. "Then fight for us by becoming what you're meant to be. Don't let them destroy 2 cold lives. One is enough." Everyone wanted me to walk away. That night I sat in my room, acceptance letters scattered around me. The smart play was obvious. Go to Columbia, build a career, maybe come back in 20 years and make a difference. But as my hand brushed against one of Dad's old law books, the worn copy of constitutional law fell open to the 6th Amendment. "In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense." Dad had counsel, a burned-out public defender who'd already given up. But what if? I flew across my keyboard, searching legal databases with a new purpose. Ferretta v. California, 1975. The Supreme Court ruled that defendants have a constitutional right to represent themselves. People v. Sharp, Ohio Court of Appeals, 1987. Limited circumstances where family members could assist pro se defendants. Then I found it, buried in Section 841.2 of the State Criminal Code. A pro se defendant may request familial assistance in cases where counsel has been deemed inadequate, subject to court approval. The legal loophole existed. It was narrow, rarely used, but it was there. My transformation began that night. My bedroom became a war room. I memorized every rule of criminal procedure, every evidence standard, every objection protocol. I practiced opening statements in the mirror, rehearsing until every word flowed naturally. I spent hours researching Judge Vance's background, his entire career trajectory. He'd built his reputation on being tough on crime, code for harsh on people like my father. But I also discovered something else, whispers about his conduct, complaints that never stuck because no one had ever systematically compiled the evidence. I had been compiling that evidence for weeks. 2 days before the trial, I walked into the jail one last time. "Dad," I said, picking up the phone, looking directly into his eyes, "I found a way to represent you in court." "Alana, no." "You're 17! You don't know what you're up against." "I know exactly what I'm up against," I countered, my voice hardening. "A corrupt judge who's built his career destroying people like us." "But Dad, I also know every case Vance has tried in the past 5 years. I know every legal precedent that applies to your situation. I know the law better than that public defender ever will. And I know that knowledge is the one thing they can't take from us. You taught me that, remember?" For the first time in weeks, Elias Cole smiled. Not the defeated smile of a broken man, but the proud smile of a father watching his daughter become everything he knew she could be. Then let's go to war, baby girl. The day before the trial, I sat outside Thorn Construction waiting for the site security guard, Javier. He was listed as unavailable for comment in the police report. At 6:47 p.m., I spotted him. "Excuse me, Javier. I'm Alana Cole. Elias Cole is my father." Javier went pale. "I can't talk to you. I told the police everything." "Did you?" I asked quietly. "The report says you were unavailable for comment." He stopped walking. "Look, kid, I got mouths to feed. I can't lose this job." I showed him the news article. "They're sending my father to prison for 10 years for something he didn't do. He was protecting your crew from a drunk operator. Thorn attacked first, didn't he?" Javier lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "Thorn's connected. His brother-in-law, Senator Wilkes, practically owns this city. People who cross him don't work here anymore. And people who let innocent men go to prison?" Something in my eyes, the steel he must have seen in my father's, made him pause. "There's security footage," he said quietly. My heart stopped. "What?" "The cameras weren't broken like Thorn claimed. I saved everything." He looked around, then decided. "Follow me." Javier led me to a dimly lit security office. "Thorn told me to delete this. Said the hard drives crashed," he muttered, sitting at the monitors. "But you didn't. My nephew." "He got a raw deal 2 years ago. No evidence, but the judge still sent him away. I swore I'd never let that happen again." The screen flickered to life. Javier fast-forwarded to the timestamp. There was Dad, calm, gesturing toward the unsteady forklift. Thorn's aggressive body language was clear. Then Thorn shoved Dad hard. Dad stumbled back, hands up peacefully. Thorn advanced again, swinging wildly. Only then did Dad defend himself with one controlled push. "Textbook self-defense," Javier whispered. Tears streamed down my face. Here was undeniable proof. "Why didn't you come forward?" Javier ejected a USB drive. "Because Thorn made clear what happens to people who cross him. His brother-in-law, Senator Wilkes, funds Judge Vance's re-election campaigns." The pieces clicked into place. It's not just bias. It's an entire protection racket. The workers who complain about safety end up in Vance's courtroom facing trumped-up charges, all to protect Thorn's bottom line. "Javier, will you testify?" He nodded slowly. "If you guarantee my family's safety, yeah." It's time someone stood up. I clutched the USB drive like gold. They weren't just saving Dad. They were bringing down the whole system. The morning of the trial, I walked into the courthouse carrying 3 thick binders. Media cameras flashed. Inside the courtroom, every seat was filled. Judge Vance entered, black robes flowing like a cape. I took my place at the defense table next to Dad. "You sure about this, baby girl?" He squeezed my hand. "I've never been more sure of anything." The prosecutor, District Attorney Mitchell Hayes, a political climber known for a ruthless conviction rate, rose to his feet. "Your Honor," I stood, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "my name is Alana Cole. I'm here to invoke my client's constitutional right to self-representation with familial assistance under State Criminal Code, Section 841-2. Hayes jumped up. "Your Honor, this is absurd. A 17-year-old child cannot possibly provide adequate legal representation." "Your Honor," I cut in smoothly, "I may direct the court's attention to People v. Sharp, which specifically allows familial assistance when appointed counsel has been deemed inadequate." Judge Vance's jaw tightened. "And what makes you think Mr. Sterling's representation is inadequate?" "The fact that Mr. Sterling advised my father to plead guilty to a crime he didn't commit without reviewing crucial evidence or interviewing key witnesses. He spent exactly 14 minutes on this case before recommending a plea deal." The gallery gasped. Vance leaned forward, his voice dripping with condescension. "Miss Cole, let me explain something. This is not a movie where plucky teenagers save the day. This is a court of law where serious adults handle serious matters." I met his gaze without flinching. "With respect, Your Honor, my father's freedom is the most serious matter in my life. I think 1 month of caring makes me more qualified than a public defender who couldn't be bothered to return our phone calls." The courtroom went dead silent. Vance's face flushed red. "Young lady, you will not interrupt this court. One more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt." "My apologies, Your Honor." I bowed slightly. I was simply exercising my client's rights under established legal precedent. Hayes, sensing a quick win, began his opening. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defendant, Elias Cole, has a documented history of workplace violence that his daughter conveniently forgot to mention. My blood ran cold. What history? Hayes pulled out a thick file. 3 separate complaints filed against the defendant over the past 2 years. Aggressive behavior toward supervisors, threats against management. A pattern of escalating violence that culminated in the brutal attack on Reggie Thorne. I shot to my feet. Objection! Those documents were never disclosed during discovery. Vance barely glanced at me. Overruled. Sit down, Miss Cole. Hayes continued, emboldened, pulling out photos of a heavily bruised Thorne. These photos show a man who was beaten within an inch of his life. I stared in shock. Dad barely touched him. How could Thorne look this injured? The jury was already looking at my father with suspicion. I felt the case slipping away. During the recess, I stared at the fabricated evidence. They'd been ready for me. Every argument I'd prepared, they'd countered with a lie timed perfectly to destroy Dad's credibility. The fix was in, deeper than I'd imagined. But as I walked to the hallway, I felt the USB drive heavy in my laptop bag. They'd ambushed me with lies. Now it was time to hit back with the truth. I returned to the courtroom with fire in my eyes. The defense may present its opening statement, Judge Vance announced, barely concealing his irritation. I walked to the center of the courtroom, carrying my laptop like a weapon. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution just told you a story. A carefully crafted fiction designed to send an innocent man to prison. But I'm going to show you the truth. I clicked my laptop. The large courtroom screen illuminated with a crystal-clear video feed. This is security footage from Thorne Construction on the day of the alleged assault, footage the prosecution somehow forgot to mention. Hayes shot to his feet. Objection! This evidence wasn't disclosed. Your Honor, I interrupted smoothly. The prosecution just introduced undisclosed evidence without warning. I am simply following their precedent. Vance's face darkened. Where did you obtain this footage? From the security company contracted by Thorne Construction, the same company that was ordered to delete this evidence. But someone had the courage to preserve the truth. On screen, the footage played. Thorne shoving Dad first. Dad trying to de-escalate. Thorne attacking again. Dad defending himself with one controlled push. The courtroom was dead silent. Your Honor, Hayes yelled, this footage could be doctored, manipulated. Could be, I said, but it wasn't. Your Honor, I call Javier Martinez to authenticate this evidence. Vance's knuckles went white around his gavel. Mr. Martinez was unavailable for testimony. He's available now. Javier walked down the aisle, his face determined. I was threatened, he said loudly from the stand. Thorne told me if I testified, I'd never work construction again. My family would be blacklisted. I turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, this is how the system works for people like my father. Evidence disappears. Witnesses are silenced. Truth becomes inconvenient. I clicked to a new slide showing financial documents. But the corruption goes deeper. Thorne Construction is owned by the Thorne family. Judge Vance's re-election campaign manager is Marcus Wilkes, the senator's brother, who has facilitated over $2 million in untendered, non-competitive city contracts to Thorne Construction in the past 5 years. The courtroom erupted. Vance banged his gavel violently. Miss Cole, you are in contempt. Your Honor, my voice rose above the chaos, these are public records. Your political associates have been steering city contracts to the company while you've been sending the workers who complain about safety violations to prison. Hayes was on his feet screaming objections, but I wasn't finished. The fabricated complaints against my father, they were filed immediately after Thorne Construction lost a city contract due to safety violations. The fake injury photos taken weeks after the incident were at a private medical facility owned by... I paused for effect, looking directly at Vance. Marcus Wilkes. Your Honor, this isn't just about my father. This is about a systematic corruption scheme that has destroyed 48 families. Workers who speak up about unsafe conditions get arrested. Their families get destroyed. Also, your political network can profit. Vance slammed his gavel. I will not tolerate these accusations in my courtroom. Then step down from this case. Recuse yourself! Let an impartial judge hear the evidence. The silence was deafening. Vance stared at me, his career hanging in the balance. I delivered the final blow. Furthermore, I have documentation of 48 similar cases. 48 black men sentenced by this court to terms averaging over 400% above state guidelines. Justice demands that you recuse yourself from this case immediately. Vance slowly set down his gavel. His voice was barely audible. This court acknowledges that there may be conflicts of interest that prevent me from ruling impartially on this matter. I hereby recuse myself from this case. The courtroom exploded. Reporters rushed out. My mother burst into tears. Vance looked directly at me, his career in ruins, his voice carrying a grudging respect. Miss Cole, in 30 years of practice, I have never seen such thorough preparation or fearless advocacy. You have reminded this court what justice is supposed to look like. Within hours, a respected jurist was assigned to the case. After reviewing my evidence, she reconvened the court. After reviewing the evidence presented by the defense, this court finds the prosecution's case to be fundamentally flawed and potentially fraudulent. All charges against Elias Cole are hereby dismissed. Dad's handcuffs clicked open, and he was truly free. Father and daughter embraced as the courtroom erupted in applause. 6 months later, I walked across the stage at my high school graduation, but my cap held more than just a tassel. Tucked inside was an acceptance letter to Yale Law School with a full scholarship created specifically for students who demonstrate extraordinary courage in pursuing justice. The same law books still lined the walls of our apartment, but they were joined by framed newspaper articles about the corruption case. Dad was back at work, but now as a safety supervisor with the power to shut down dangerous operations. You know what I'm proudest of? Dad asked as we packed my bags for New Haven. What, Dad? You didn't just save me. You saved every worker who will never have to face a rigged system because you had the courage to expose it. I smiled, picking up the worn copy of constitutional law. You taught me that knowledge is the one thing they can't take from us. And you taught me that courage is what turns knowledge into justice. The investigation I triggered resulted in Judge Vance serving 4 years for corruption and over 17 wrongful convictions being overturned. At Yale Law Orientation, I stood before 200 of the brightest legal minds in the country. They expected me to talk about prestige, but I knew something they didn't. The most powerful force in any courtroom isn't connections or expensive suits. It's someone who refuses to be silent when they witness injustice. They underestimated a black girl from the Heights with old law books and a righteous cause. What are they underestimating about you? The system tried to break the Cole family. Instead, Alana Cole broke the system, and that's just the beginning. Tell me in the comments below, what injustice, big or small, are you refusing to accept in your life, your neighborhood, or your workplace? And what is the one piece of knowledge you have that the system hasn't counted on? Let's talk about it. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when they refuse to stay quiet.